So we had dinner, and then we all went in the living room. I didn't talk much, but I tried to talk enough that I wasn't just totally, invisible. So, but these were heavy hitters, and they were all great friends. And Kate Thompson did a lot of talking and everything. We went in the living room, and we started watching Funny Face, which was a couple of years old at that point, with Audrey Hepburn and Kate Thompson, that Roger Edens was also involved in. And I remember during one part of it when Audrey Hepburn and...
Screening on a projector.
Yeah,
right.
35 millimeter.
Of course.
And with all these heavy hitters. And at one point, Kate Thompson and Audrey Hepburn are doing a number together. And Kate Thompson got up by the screen and started doing the number with it. And I started to say to myself, did you ever believe that you're ever going to be in this? And I thought, wait a minute. No, I always knew I was going to.
Did you?
I'd projected things like that I always knew I was going to be part of that circle, but I didn't know how I was going to be there. I thought maybe I was going to be there as an actor, but I wasn't sure that was going to work out.
And back then when you projected that you thought you'd be part of that circle, how did you define that circle? A circle of people who loved quality films as much as you did?
Yeah.
And,
and movie people, and people were making those movies.
Yeah.
People
but
like
the good
Kate.
movies, the smart movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you weren't making
And so, so I thought, no, I thought I was going to be here. And I thought, well, you were so stupid, but that's how you felt. So then the evening, when the evening was over, after the movie was over, everybody started to leave. So I started to leave too. And I thought, well, I don't know why I was here. And we got to the door, and Lucy said, well, have you signed those contracts yet? And I said, what contracts? And she said, like, really angry at me, the contracts to be part of my under contract to Desilu. Yeah, you stupid idiot.
You stooge.
And I said, no, nobody's ever said anything. She said, well, do they have your address? And
Don't you live in a doorman building?
Yes.
Good God.
I said, well, I think they do, but I'll call them and give it to them. She said, well, they'll send them over to you tomorrow, sign them. And bang went the door. And I walked down, I thought, my God, I'm under contract, Lucille Ball.
You're in.
Bob was in your workshop.
He was the first young person that I laid eyes on, and boing, I said, wow, that young man. Then when I got to know him, even better.
What did you think of Bob as an actor?
Oh, he was wonderful. He did some marvelous things for us. He was a natural actor. And when he was called upon to do things that were not in his, what was when they're just starting, he really worked at it. He was very conscientious. But he was always such a gentleman and such a doll and so nice to look at and be around.
Let there be fun everywhere. We want to be by you.
And that was the greatest thing that happened to me, and that was luck again, because Desi was not around. There was another guy, Dick Coleman, who had an unfortunate end to his life later, but he was been on Broadway and kind of knew show business. And Lucy kind of liked the two of us being around because she thought I could make him a little less show busy and he would make me a little jazzier, not quite so square. And so she would have us over to the house a lot. She would show movies that she'd been in, the ones that worked and the ones that didn't work. She'd show a lot of her television shows and show us, a one that was not funny, an episode, and why that could have been funny, why it didn't work, and how she'd show a good one, why it did work, and how... I remember an illustration that she said that, if you've got to play a cello poorly, you first have to learn how to play it correctly so you know how to be funny doing it. Because otherwise you're just flailing around and it's not funny. And how you have to be prepared and all that. It was like a year's master class with this great artist about the business. And she would take us, because she was not paying us much money, she would take us when Marlene Dietrich would come to the Amundsen and then take us backstage because she knew Dietrich so we could meet her. She took us backstage after seeing Vivian Leigh and Duel of Angels at the Huntington Hartford Theater. First time I ever met Betty Davis was she took us back after seeing The World of Carl Sandburg that Betty Davis was doing there. So we had this great opportunity to meet these people, also see these great artists on the stage. And I gotta say, that was such a stroke of luck to meet somebody who was willing to give us this education. And because she also knew that both Dick Coleman and I had a serious interest in being a part of the business in a serious way. So she was like spending the time teaching us this stuff that could we could use later. And it's come in so handy so many times.
What would you identify as the time when you're, when this kind of apprenticeship, if you will, that you're doing underneath Lucille Ball, when does that come to an end and what becomes the next chapter of your career?
Well, the next chapter kind of came thanks to Olivia de Havilland, to drop another name. I'd done an interview with her for a magazine, an in-flight magazine I was writing for, in order to get free tickets to movies. And because, again, I didn't have enough money to go to movies much. And we got along very well. And so we had some champagne together. So we started kind of a friendship that endures, I must say, to this day. We talk almost every Sunday on the telephone. She's in Paris and I'm in New York, and she's the brightest, most interesting woman. She's now 97, and she's just got so much sense about her. And she's the definitive picture of what you want a great movie star to become later in her life, because she's not about being in film, she's about being a human being and about other people and just the way she's led her life. But anyway, through this friendship, Olivia took me, asked me to escort her to a AFI tribute to Betty Davis. And I knew that this Betty Davis event was coming up, the AFI tribute in Hollywood. And this is before Olivia got in the picture. And I knew I wanted to go, and I knew then that this era was coming to a close of Betty Davis, and I knew Cagney was going to be there, and Fred Astaire would be there, and Orson Welles would be there. And I thought, I've got to be there. Somehow I've got to be there. I couldn't afford to I think it was $100 a plate or something, and that was beyond comprehension for me. And so I found out that John Springer, publicist, was handling the event, and Ray Strickland, who was an actor who worked for John at that point, was going to be working for him on it. So I called up Ray, who I knew, and I said, look, is there any way you could sneak me in to the AFI thing? Because I would really love to be there, but I can't afford a ticket. And he said, well, let me think. And he called back and he said, look, go out and rent a tuxedo. And he said, I'll sneak you in through the kitchen. So I went out and rented a tuxedo, and when I came back, after renting the tuxedo, the phone rang, and it was Olivia calling. First thing she said was, I have a proposition for you, and it's not indecent. She said, would you escort me to the Betty Davis event? And I thought, oh my God. And I was so stunned by the fact she was asking me to go with her to this event. Where was it held? At the Beverly Hilton Hotel. Right. So I was quiet, and she took that for being hesitant about it. So she said, well, I think you'll have a good time. We'll be sitting at Betty's table and all of that. So I thought, my God, I just went out and rented a tuxedo to sneak in through the kitchen. I'm going to be sitting at the head table.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor, Betty Davis.
So when the event started, and she makes her entrance, they're playing the theme from Na Voyager, and she comes in and people stand up and she's waving, and so she's coming up to this head table. Well, the head table is full of famous people, except for me. And I didn't think anything about it till she stops and kisses Paul Henreid and his wife. And then she kisses William Wyler and his wife. And I thought, oh my God, what's she gonna do? She's not gonna kiss a stranger. And what am I gonna do when she comes up there? And then I thought, no, she'll stop at her seat and sit down. But Olivia, in a great flurry, Betty,
summons her
and pulls her here. And all of a sudden, she's faced with this guy, and I could kind of see in her eyes, and all I could think of do was to take her hand and kiss it. And then she went on and kissed Geraldine Fitzgerald, and et cetera. Well, for years after, they would always use a segment of each of the AFI tributes in the beginning of the show. They would always cut to the part of this gallant guy bowing and kissing to Betty Davis. So I just got a kick out of that.
Amazing.
There was a party that Betty gave after the event in the Beverly Hilton Hotel, and Olivia was invited. And since I was with her, I got invited. And at that place, there was a guy named Fred Tatasciore, who was the director of the Dinah Shore talk show. And Dinah Shore had a daily talk show that was wonderful. And we were talking, and we were talking, you know, just about movies and about theater and about all this. And at the end of the evening, Fred Tatasciore said, you know, I'd love you to be on the Dinah Shore show someday if you could ever if we can ever figure a way how you'd fit into one of the conversations on the show. And so I'm thinking, okay, I just written a book about the Academy Awards, and I thought, Olivia's an Academy Award winner. So I called Ray Strickland, who actually worked for John Springer and Associates, who was the PR firm handling it. So I called him and I said, hey, who are some of your clients that you have that have won Academy Awards? And he said, well, we've got Shirley Jones, we have Marie Saint, we have Shelley Winters. And I explained, I said, Fred Tatasciore looking for a theme that Olivia de Havilland could fit into. And I've written this book on the Oscars, so maybe I could be on it too. And maybe they'd be interested in doing a show and you could get all your clients on it. So he called up, they set it up. Indeed, they did the show on Friday and invited me to be on it. And on the course of the show, I was able to make an impression only because Shelley Winters was on the show, and I told on the show that she was one of the reasons that I wrote my first book.
I had watched television talk shows, and Shelley Winters several times on talk shows would get up and talk about the fact that she'd been nominated for an Academy Award for A Double Life in 1947. And I was always curious as to who the other people were that she was nominated with. And I found out how difficult it was to find out that fact. So at that time, the Academy Library wasn't as functional as it is now. And so I realized that if it was that difficult for me to find out the fact, it would be nice to have a book about that. So I wrote the book. And in researching it, I found out that Shelley Winters was not nominated for that performance.
She was
For
not.
Double Life?
Right. But she was nominated many times after that, 4 times. That's why I said, I'm not sure if I should say that sitting here, because she might haul up and hit me, but she knows I love her.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. We all
You
do.
know that.
We all do.
So it caused a little brouhaha that brought me enough to the attention of the Dinah Shore people that they invited me to come back on a regular basis. So I did a lot of Dinah Shore shows, and it was that show and those shows that a girl I knew in Seattle, Washington, that I'd done a play with in Seattle, called me up and said, my God, you wrote a book. And she said, send me a copy of the book. We'll review it at the Hollywood Reporter.
And that's what led to the Hollywood Reporter job.
Yeah, but it was like, that's why I'm saying that somehow luck came into this, because for years I was writing, liner notes for record albums and, anything I could do to make enough money to pay my rent. But once it started, it just was a domino effect. It's like and I celebrate February 27th, 1977 every year, because that's the day that Olivia called to invite me to the Betty Davis thing, because everything kind of fell into place. The Fred Tatasciore, meeting him, the Dinah Shore show, out of that, the Hollywood Reporter, out of that, people coming to the Reporter to come on the air to talk about somebody in the hospital, some actor in the hospital, and then out of that, getting a job in addition to the movie channel, cable company, out of that, a thing for the Playboy channel, out of that, CBS morning program for a year, out of that, all these things. And then all that led to a chance meeting, and that led me to Turner.
So you're talking the greatest stars in Hollywood, and we haven't seen these films, certainly haven't seen them uncut, not for decades. So to get to see them again, also because it's not a commercial channel, I mean, insofar as we won't have commercials, it's not advertiser driven. So you can have a really great film on at 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and that's my job, to come on and tell people why they should watch it and what they'll like about it, and give a new life to some of these wonderful films that have just been sitting in vaults for a long time.
I think Robert and TCM are synonymous. I think he's the godfather of Turner Classic Movies.
I don't think he could have ever done as well in any other job than what he does now. And because he loves it.
That passion shows through, and people pick it up. It's infectious.
He's a scholar in classic film. He truly is. He'd make a wonderful professor. I mean, wouldn't you want to be in his class?
And he always talks in a kind of a present way, as though he's really talking to you. That's a great gift. Robert is TCM.
Let's say it again together. Robert is TCM.
He's opened the world of classic films to a lot of young people, but to people of my generation, it's like coming home.
You know you're in good hands. And you know what? He's still good looking.
He has so many wonderful qualities, and to be able to let those, share those with the audience the way he does, and the audience loves him. You know, the audience just loves Bob.
I applaud you. No, I applaud you.
tell us the story about coming to TCM.
Well, Dorothy Lamour was a friend of mine, and she came back to New York City, and we had always tried to have a dinner together in Los Angeles, and it never really worked out. And she said, look, I'm coming back to New York. We can all have that dinner. I'm going to be here 2 days. She said, there's a couple of guys from the AMC, American Movie Classics, that I do some work for, want to take me out to dinner. And she said, I want to keep a good relationship with them, and they're really nice guys. Would you mind if they came to the dinner with us? And I said, no, that'd be fine with me. These two wonderful guys, Brad Siegel and his wife, and Jim Weiss and his wife, who worked for AMC, and we had a wonderful evening, and we all talked about movies and all of this kind of stuff, had a great time. And then not long after that, Brad Siegel called me, and he said, you know a lot about movies, and he said, I think we're going to have an opening in a spot on AMC, and I'd love you to fill the afternoon spot at AMC. And I was thrilled about that. And I said, but I've got a job on the movie channel right now that runs out at the end of the year. And he said, well, if they ask you to renew, don't do it, because he said, I'd love you to come to AMC. And so that was all in the works. And then he gave me a call a little later, and he said, hey, wait a minute. Have you signed the stuff with AMC yet? And I said, no, but I'm certainly planning to. He said, well, don't. Because he said, I'm moving to Turner in Atlanta. And he said, we're going to start our own channel. You can be the main guy. And he said, you can have the MGM library, the RKO library, the pre-50 Warner Brothers library, United Artists and stuff. So he said, the movies that you have to talk about, he said, the only thing, you're going to have to go to Atlanta to shoot it. If you go with AMC, you can stay in New York. Something else to keep in mind, he said, you're going to be a second banana at AMC. You're going to be the afternoon, and there's another guy in the evening. And then at TCM, you can be the
Who
top.
was doing the evening at AMC back then?
A guy named Bob Dorian.
Right, I remember Bob Dorian.
I don't think he had a big background in film, but he was a wonderful reader. I mean,
he was
very
no
good
Robert Osborne.
Well, he was very good.
Well,
he was
I'm
very
allowed
good.
to say that.
But anyway, so that led me to Turner, and that of course, that again was part of that, that domino effect.
Hi, welcome to Turner Classic Movies. I'm Robert Osborne. I'm going to be your host right here as we present some of the best, the finest films ever made, 24 hours a day. We're going to be drawing not only from the great film libraries of MGM and Warner Brothers, but also from other outstanding film catalogs. So come join us and see not only great films and stars from the past, but also films from recent years featuring some of our newest and most watchable stars.
How does the kid from Colfax, Washington, evolve in his style and his taste? I mean, I have a picture in my Turner Classic Movies filter, in my old classic movie filter. I see you at a table, and you're with a bunch of these swells from Hollywood. You turn and say, I'll have a Michelob. And you go, I'll have a Bacardi and soda, please. When does Robert Osborne start to change in his taste? How did all this lifestyle,
I don't think I changed that much. I think I was always a little out of place in Colfax, Washington.
What was your drink when you were in Colfax, Washington?
Oh, probably Pepsi-Cola.
Right. No, not a beer? You weren't a beer drinker?
No, never.
Okay, and when you would order a drink when you were hanging out with...
well, early on, I kind of learned to like martinis and things like that. That was in college.
Sure.
That was in college.
Okay.
I think the movies are what gave me the education, because I responded to Gene Tierney, and I responded to the people in All About Eve. And that's why I kind of wanted to get out of Colfax and get to a big city. I wanted to live in New York before I had ever been to New York. I wanted to live right in Times Square, and I live at 57th and 7th. That's almost Times Square.
Sure.
But I loved the way people behaved in the movies, and I wanted to be a part of that culture. I didn't find Hollywood that swell when I got there, because they weren't behaving like I thought New Yorkers behaved. But I'm talking about New Yorkers in the movies.
Right.
The Mad Heiresses and Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn.
Well, now that you bring that up, when would you say was the moment in which you said goodbye to Hollywood, to borrow a phrase? When did you leave L.A. and become a New Yorker? You transitioned from L.A. to New York when?
Well, I transitioned in 19...
And why?
Okay, I transitioned in 1987. And why was, and that's why I think, again, luck is somehow involved in it, but I think there's a little destiny involved in it too. I've had arguments with friends of mine, but I had a great job at the Hollywood Reporter in Hollywood when the Reporter was very important, the two trade papers. And they were immune to the ups and downs of the movie business, because you were always reporting the news. You were always welcome to parties. You were always welcome to, you always had a great table wherever you went.
Everybody read the papers.
Everybody read the papers. So, and I had the main column in the paper. You couldn't have asked for a better place to operate from. But I was asked if I would mind doing an entertainment report at night and tape it in Los Angeles that could be shown on the CBS morning program, a new one they were putting together the next morning in New York. And I said, well, what if I did it live? And they said, well, would you move to New York? And I said, oh, yeah. So this lady, T.G. Wilkerson Miles, who owned the Hollywood Reporter, I went to her the next day and I said, look, I have a chance to do the CBS morning program for a year from New York. Would you let me go to New York to do it and work out of the New York office? And she said, well, let me think about it. So she came back the next day and she said, well, I've thought about it. And she said, if they say your name with the Hollywood Reporter every day, that's great publicity for us. And we don't have a great presence in New York City. And she said, and we've just lost our theater critic in New York. So if you would do the column, but also do the theater reviews in New York, or be in charge of it,
in other
at
words,
least
if I could work you to
assignments.
death while you're in New York.
Yes, exactly. You could
I'll
go,
let you
but
go.
you have to come back after a year. So I said, oh, absolutely.
It's time now for Movie Watch, and here once again is Robert Osborne. Hello.
Hello. Have you seen any good movies lately? Any bad movies?
Not the one that not the one that you're going to talk
Have you ever
about.
seen a movie that made your teeth hurt? It was. Have you? Well, we'll see. We'll talk about that.
And so I got to New York. The minute I got in New York, I thought, I can't ever go back. But now I have to figure out, I love the city. I love the vitality of it. And there was all the theater here and the restaurants, any kind of way you wanted to dress up or down, it was here. Interesting people. And I don't think I ever saw anyone read a book in Los Angeles. They were carrying a gym bag, not books.
Right.
And everybody was interested in talking about the entertainment business. And I was interested in that too, but not like 24 hours a day. Sure. And I wanted to kind of have something else in my life. And I thought maybe a year would do it. But I thought I can't go back. I have to figure out now how to stay in New York and keep my job at the Hollywood Reporter without getting fired, because if I don't come back. So luckily, and again, fate was on my side, is that at the end of the year, the CBS show was over, but the Hollywood Reporter was sold to another company, BPI. And the new owners thought of me as a New Yorker. So nobody ever asked me to come back again. The editor quit because she didn't like the new owners. So I never had to go back to LA. And I was very willing to do that. But if I hadn't done that in New York, I'd never have had the lunch with Dorothy Lamour to meet the AMC people to get the job at Turner eventually. And that's why I think fate is worked into it some way.
You know, TCM has a variety of programs of different types of things they've been doing other than showing films from the golden era, as you've said. And one of them is the private screenings program, where you've had some pretty iconic people come and do that show.
Yeah, we have.
What are some of your memories of that?
Well, particularly Betty Hutton. I did one with Betty Hutton, and Betty Hutton hadn't been seen for like 30 years. She was a very proud woman, a very, very emotional woman. I had met her earlier and knew how dear she was, but complicated she was. And it was complicated because I also knew that just because she might come to Atlanta, where we were shooting the interview, we might not get her from the hotel to the studio. I think Betty came because she knew me and she kind of trusted me.
So that's your chair.
Okay.
She was very nervous, so we didn't sit down and just start the interview. We started filming her from the minute she walked into the studio.
How are you today?
I'm scared. That's all.
No, it's going to be easy.
I'm shaking.
So it was never like we were going to start the interview. All of a sudden we were talking, and it was kind of golden what we got on the air.
I'm getting worn out here, aren't I?
No, you're wonderful.
Oh, Bob.
Are you tired?
No, I'm scared. I'm just getting over
great.
the fear inside.
You're great.
I was so scared. I told all the lovely people you sent to work, I said, I'm so scared. I'm sick.
No, you're great. You're great.
Oh,
And these
Bob.
such interesting stories you're telling.
Let me give you a kiss for that. I
Such
love
interesting
you.
stories you're telling.
Oh, I really had great experiences.
Do you think of yourself as having had a hard life?
My private life has been hell, really hell. But my professional life was so wonderful because the audiences understood I was working from my heart.
But she was so forthcoming and so dear and so complicated. And I think it did a great deal for her. And it also kind of renewed her to a lot of people. And so people were kind of aware of Betty Hutton again for the first time. And then when she died, her death got a notice on the front page of the New York Times. And I thought, I'm not sure if Turner hadn't been involved in that, in kind of bringing her back into people's consciousness. People still talk about that interview today. I'm very proud of it.
Talk about the private screening you did with Mitchum.
Mitchum, that was a nightmare. That was a nightmare. Because, yeah, well, you know, I had connections with him before, and he's a very bright guy. He liked to drink, but I'd been to a couple film festivals and had spent a lot of time with him talking, and he was so bright, which I don't think he liked people to know that. He wrote poetry. You know, he was a brilliant guy. The minute we got on the set, now, number one, he had a tank on because he had such a problem breathing that he had a tank, and he put the tank aside, and he had a nurse with him. And about every 5 minutes, he would put his hand up. We thought he had to go to the bathroom. He wanted to go have a cigarette. So, you know, but anyway, he was there sitting on this chair with Jane Russell, the two of them, and he totally stonewalled me.
If we were giving you an Oscar right now for your best performance, which one would you pick it to be?
It's dwindling down because I got to think of the ones that I've seen. I haven't a clue.
You don't have a favorite Robert Mitchum film?
No, I don't think so. They don't pay you to see him.
So are there a lot of...
I just like Robert Mitchum movies.
Are there a lot of Mitchum films you haven't seen?
I believe there are, yes.
And no interest after you've made a film and spent that time doing them to look at them?
They say that's a wrap. When that's it, go cash the check.
And we'd take a break, and he'd be chatty again at lunch. He would chat, and he'd talk, and he'd be great. But he was just being mean.
What about Mickey Rooney?
Well, Mickey Rooney was great. I mean, he's always been very nice to me. But he, at one point in an interview we did, it's like he's talking to me about dust-up that he had on the set with the director of a movie, Killer McCoy, when he made that movie. And he got right in my face with such anger and all of that kind of stuff. And I wanted to smile to take some of the anger out of the moment, and I was literally afraid for fear he might hit me or something.
And I started the scene, and Roy Rowland said, "Cut!" And we looked around, and he said, "The hell do you think you are?" He said, "Just because you are Mickey Rooney and this and that, so when I want a little attention, I want attention. Do you understand that?" And he berated me on the set like I have never in my life taken anything. And he said to me, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go home." And I grabbed him I'm sorry, you know. And I grabbed him like this, and I said, "You're not going home at all." "I'm going home." And I went out the stage door, got into my car, and I drove to my home in Encino. And I was never coming back because I was so hurt.
Just those kind of memorable moments. It's been so wonderful to be able to sit and talk at length with some of those people, the Lauren Bacalls and the Angela Lansburys and the others that we've had.
May I tell you a story? I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you whether you want to hear it or not.
I guess remembering the past is more difficult than I thought.
But thanks for doing it with us. We appreciate it.
A sudden whisper, a sweet refrain, in every thought of you.
All these big stars that I had never met. It was wonderful for me. I loved it.
These stories, he gets them from an old book of jokes and attributes them to me.
See, I was up for that part. I would have been better.
You were an accomplished dancer, and I tripped over curbs.
How do you make it terrific? Honest to God, you're terrific.
When did you know you had the talent to do that?
I always knew it.
Did you?
Yeah.
You also danced in the movie, in a ballet.
I don't think there was any need to bring that up, really.
As I get older, it becomes long. It's like I'm walking through the snow barefoot.
And then I realized the audience was standing up for me. It was a moment I'll never forget.
I did so enjoy acting and so enjoy filming.
And still do.
And still do.
I was enraptured by the movies, and I've remained enraptured to this day.
The every thought of you.
You know when you're sad?
Rolling. Speed.
One of my guilty pleasures is seeing crazy, ordinary, silly movies. One of my favorite things to do is to read. One of my favorite places to travel is to Paris because of its beauty and because of its flavors and its atmosphere. My drink of choice in the morning, apple juice. Later in the day, Kettle One on the rocks.